And we are live. Welcome back to the Gio and Joey Show. Joey, how you doing? Introduce our guest today.
Doing better than I deserve. So our guest today comes from across the pond, but he comes in peace. And so for those of you that watch the DW Friends show, you'll know Ben Piboworth. He's 19. He's a 19-year-old Brit who knows more about American politics and history than most American citizens.
Mercy.
I was thinking of a joke here. Matt Walsh is always talking about he wants more like tests and whatnot for voting to keep like non-citizens and whatever. I'm like, yeah, except that Ben's not a citizen, but I'm pretty sure whatever test you come up with, it wouldn't keep him out of voting. So
Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Okay, so Joey, tell us what we're gonna tackle today and why we have Ben on.
yeah, so we're gonna tackle issues of religious freedom. Obviously, we usually cover American politics, but it's nice to kind of get a different perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, right, we're a Christian podcast. Christianity isn't just about America, it's about the world and religious freedom and a lot of the trends that I've noticed start in Europe. Well, some stuff starts here, like, and goes that way, but some stuff they seem a little bit further along. So I figure if we talk to a Brit, we might be able to get a little bit of a forecast about what could be coming in the secular waves. So.
Okay, we're gonna open up with a video which has a interesting campaign slogan, and then Ben, you're gonna have to break it down for us and let us know exactly what it's talking about. Let's go to the videotape.
For 200 years, the Conservative and Unionist Party of the United Kingdom has bravely and consistently betrayed not only its own voter base, but all native peoples of the British Isles. From constitutional reforms to dissolving the British Empire, from desecration of tradition to importing endless migrants, it is the Conservative Party that has been on the forefront of the destruction of this ancient people and their lands. I am immensely proud of what we have managed to achieve as a party, taking the greatest empire to ever span the face of the earth to being a pathetic, miserable, and broken nation mocked the world over. In recent years, we have greatly accelerated our plans to crush the ethnic Britons, making sure we openly show our hatred to you at every turn. And let me be clear, we do hate you. We despise you. We have not done enough, though. Despite all of our betrayal, our blatant loathing of you, you still vote for us. Even as we refuse to simply deliver a referendum, and then when we do, we subvert your wishes by then opening our borders to the world. Even as we take all of your wealth and make the promised public services completely unusable, there are still some of you who vote for us. It is you, our voters, who we find the most disgusting. To combat this, I am incredibly proud to introduce our new policy, 0 seats. 0 seats is the policy where we shall do everything possible to make sure at the next general election, we as a party obtain 0 seats. You will have already seen 0 seats in action, such as arguing over how much of your money to send to foreign conflicts that are nothing to do with you, or straight up making you homeless as we lavishly treat foreign peoples and hand over your property to them, and then criminally punishing you if you so much as point any of this out. So please, when you think about the next election, think 0 seats. If we all play our part, we can finally make 0 seats a reality.
You know, that reminded me of, I couldn't help but think, is this an advertising for government in Canada?
Before I get started, I want to get a few things out of the way. First,
They are way out there, the Canadian. So what is this 0 seat about? And what are they mocking? What are they after? Break it down for us.
The voice you heard was like an AI generated of the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. So over the last few years, over the last 14 years, the Conservative Party have controlled the UK. So because basically you had Jeremy Corbyn running the last election, who was, I think nobody wanted him. So they basically got a massive majority, and as a result, they basically controlled the whole government. But instead of actually doing things the voters wanted, they kind of reversed all their promises to lower immigration because of Brexit and stuff like that. So they just reduced everything, they've not reduced everything, just opened up the borders, even like since COVID.
And so, what is the frustration of the general population? You know, what are the people voicing? What are the trends you're seeing? Are people at a point where they're already fed up, or are they still bending over backwards? Like, where are we at this moment?
Sure. So there's basically a higher tax burden in the UK than there is in the US. So you pay all these to get these so-called like government services, which you don't actually really get them. So you basically, so we have a national health service, which you basically get in a queue. So you just wait for like 18 months to actually get seen. So we don't actually have any like privatization in the system. So you pay all this, you pay like your tax money for it, but you don't actually get the results.
Joey, jump in here.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, it was obviously satire, but it's obviously getting at something that people are really feeling. And like I said, like I'm a conservative, right? So I'm not a populist, right? In the sense that I do believe in the importance of institutions. And listen, I consider America is the only country I would die for. But like Jeremy Burring was saying out of space, I'm a bit of an Anglophile, right? In other words, American values, we got those from Britain, right? Like we are an extension of the Anglosphere. And so what happens in Britain matters. And I think the trend of people being upset with the Conservative Party is the same as people here being upset with the Republican Party. It's just, I feel like in this moment, there's a danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? In the sense that, yes, Republicans, yes, conservatives in the UK can be troublesome, can ignore the will of the people. Not everything that can be done in response to that, though, is going to be healthy. And I think the important thing for both conservatives in the US and Britain to remember is like to listen to what the people are saying, unlike our party has been doing in the past, but to not just go into like a kind of grievance politic. But I was interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think the problem is there's no like pressure release valve, so there is actually no way the voters can respond. So we don't have a primary system like in the US. So for everyone, you vote in your primary for your local rep, you vote for your. So it's all selected by the party. So the parties basically have a monopoly. So they choose who gets on the ballots. So basically, no one can. So there's no choice basically.
So you guys vote for your local MPs though, right? Which are like
Yeah,
the
but
local representative in Parliament.
yes, you vote for your local one representative, but you can't actually. There's no primary system. So if you're a member of the Conservative Party, you can't vote for your whoever. So you can't vote for like you don't have a primary. So you vote for Conservative Party, select somebody. So you could have someone who's not actually from the district, who's never been there, gets given your like where you live because it's a safe seat for the Conservatives, and so it's basically kind of donors and special interests basically control the whole political system.
And no wonder we broke off. That sounds crazy, bro.
Since 1776.
Nah, I know. All joking aside, though, what is the sentiment of the people, the everyday folk, and especially the religious folk? You know, the ones who understand that there is a greater kingdom than the earthly empires. How do they view it, though? Is there a sense of exasperation, or I mean, what's going on in their minds?
I think there's kind of just a separation. So people just they try to act like it's not happening. They just try to live their lives, like raise their children, just do kind of your values based things. So you can't change the political situation. So it's not something you can really do anything about. So you can care for your children. You can hopefully make sure they get good jobs. So it's more that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, if I'd be frustrated, it's time for another revolutionary war. I mean, something, because if you can't vote in primaries, if you can't have a direct, but then again, though, Faith and Repentance here on the YouTube channel says the people live under an illusion of choice. And I guess you could say it's the same thing here because, you know, Democrat, Republicans, we should have a third choice. This is why a third political party would be good for the nation, because then you would have at least more choice. What do you think of that, Joey? Because I see the wheels spinning.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as well on the American side, sure, it would be great. Like, I just think it's every year, every election year, somebody's talking like, oh, there's going to be a third party this year, and it's like it's not going to happen. We know it's not going to happen,
Yeah,
and so
it's not.
it's not something that I put, my eggs in that basket just because it's not. That's the system we have is the system we have, and listen, I'm not a revolutionary at heart, and so I would always prefer tweaking the system that is to changing the system as a whole. Obviously, there's 1770. No offense, Ben. 1776, I think, was a moment for that. But then what happened in France, right? They had a revolution, and a lot of people's heads rolled, and then the monarchy came back. So, like I said, that's the danger of revolution. But I'm gonna kind of twisting gears here a little bit. I have a question for you. So, something we've been talking about a lot on the show, and something a movement that's been happening in America, right, is Christian nationalism, or on our Catholic brothers' side, integralism. And they seem to think that if the church and the state were more united, right, in power wise, we'd get some sort of Christian nation. But the fact is, you guys have a state church, correct?
Yeah.
How
So
how has that affected the religiosity in Britain? Just curious.
basically, the state church basically just kind of follows what the government says. So basically, they're kind of even 5 years ahead of the government on like social issues. So they started in the 90s. They started pushing like women priests, and then they did. I think in the last couple of years they've started to do gay marriage and all the transgender sort of stuff. So they want to be kind of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to be a light in the world. They want to be of it. They want, because a lot of these there'll be like priests and stuff. They want to be on the BBC. They want to get like good interviews. They want to have like columns and stuff, and they want to be interviewed by kind of the secular press and want to be a part of that sort of culture. Also, I don't have. I was just going to say like.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you can because right.
No, I was just gonna say it's almost like when the church accrues for itself political power, it becomes bound to political and public sentiment, right?
Yeah.
I think the good thing about having a free church, right, that's not entwined with the state, is that listen, we can say the hard truth regardless of what public opinion says because it's the truth, right? And so that's just something I've been thinking of. But then obviously you're not, and we'll get into this a little bit, but you're not a member of the state church though, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I know you're. So what kind of Baptist are you? Because here in America you have Free Will Baptists, and then you have the once saved, always saved Baptists, and some Baptists that lean Calvinistic. So where do you stand?
To be honest, so we're more on the Calvinistic sort of side of it. So
Okay.
it's more. So also, I think there is you kind of ask basically any Baptist, you probably get a different answer from every single person. But I think that kind of is a result kind of the Reformation, where basically kind of everyone has their own kind of perspective of it. But yeah, so basically I don't go to a Baptist church. I go to an FIEC church, which is just the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches. There's about 600 churches in the UK that are evangelical. So there'll be some who are more Anglican, so more Presbyterian style, than more Baptist style.
Okay. And are you heavily active, or you're one like what I call two timers, go for Easter and Christmas?
No, I go every week, and I go during the week as well.
Okay, amen for that. Amen for that. How do you feel, you personally, about what's happening in your country? I mean, you're young, you're 19 years old, so you don't. I presume you don't have a wife and children yet, and so how do you feel about what the future holds? Do you think you'll always live in Great Britain or in England? And do you ever plan on coming over stateside and living here?
To be honest, I don't think long term, I don't think I will stay in the country, because I think just politically, the path it's going down, I don't see any way of it getting out of that path. And also, there's certain things I just disagree with, like fundamentally have like problems with the country.
And how is the future of the country economically? Like, do you see a path to like here in America, and obviously I've never lived there, but here in America, I mean, you can go from zero, no pun intended to the video, you could go from zero to hero. You can, 80% of the millionaires in America are like first generation. How's the path forward there? Because I know taxes are heavy there.
Yeah, so there's not really. I don't think there's much economic opportunity long term. I think slowly, because we basically have the same problems the US does with like with all the retirement and people are retiring, and so you basically have where there's more retirees than there are workers. So you have an aging population. You don't have replacement levels. So I think there are problems long term. Also, government spending is just out of control.
Yeah,
The
but I mean,
government spending.
there's government spending everywhere. I mean, we're in the trillions here. I mean, Joey, I mean, you could pipe in here, but what makes us better than anywhere else as far as that, right? Every country spending, and China, people talk about China becoming a superpower economically and all that, but China's facing their own issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think everywhere is struggling. I do think, to what Ben's saying, I do think in America we are protected from some of the worst elements of the things that are plaguing Europe. So obviously, we know our border is a mess, right? And we have an immigration crisis here. But I think what's happening in Europe is way more existential because
Hmm.
I was like, maybe you could give me better numbers, Ben, but it's something like, isn't it like a fifth of the country, like 20% of the country is ethnically non-British, or no, is it
I think
higher?
I think it's I think it's about 25% of people in the UK weren't born in the UK because we didn't even really have mass immigration until 1997. So we started to have stuff. So we had immigration from the 60s onwards, really, at a large scale, but not really until 1997. We've had really open borders since then.
And London is majority
Yeah,
non-English, correct?
non-English. Yeah, yeah.
And the thing, like, obviously, like, where I think why that's more of a problem there is because, like, obviously, I think unchecked immigration, particularly illegal immigration, is a problem in America as well. But in America, we're not um, like, there is no race that is Americans. In other words, if you do adhere to a set of ideas, you can be an American. But in a lot of the European countries, that's not as true, right? There is a culture, and there is such thing as English, right? And there is such thing as French in a way that there isn't American. And so I guess, how have you seen, like, practically the immigration problem play out in, like, day to day life in England?
So I live in a town, so it doesn't really affect us. It's basically all the cities. So you'll go into a city and it will be say 50% minority, and then you go out to the towns and then it'll be 99% like white British. So it's really kind of a cultural shock more than anything. Because I go to school in Leicester, so that's one of the like more majority, I think, Muslim population. Is one of the highest percentages in the country. I think it's about 60% like non-British. So you do have like certain cultural differences. So it's like a lot of the if you go for food, like you wouldn't go for food because we all halal food a lot of the time, unless it's like McDonald's and stuff like that. So all the
Oh,
restaurants and stuff like that.
so let me ask you, right? Because the media obviously is a medium, and the media tries to manipulate people. And sometimes when you see stuff from Europe and other places and the immigration issues, and some of them is legit, some of them could just be media ploy. Uh, we tend to see the negative stuff because the negative stuff sells. But how are native British and, let's say, immigrant populations getting along? I mean, what's the relationship like to the day-to-day people? Because if I walk here in Texas, even in downtown Houston, people aren't talking race issues. People just want to live their lives, go to work, eat, feed their children. You got to be in the wrong spots. So how is the day-to-day life with the immigrant population? Because you hear nasty stuff and rapes and murders and stabbings, but is that...
Yeah, so I think on the day to day you don't actually really see it. It's you basically will only see something on the news, and it won't be you you'll only know it'll be Leicester man attacks, or you will see, he will never say, or they'll blur everything out on the TV and stuff, so when there is actually violent crime. So I think most people don't see it in their day to day, and they only see something when something bad happens, really. But I think most people just kind of live their lives, so it doesn't really affect people on the day to day. But when it affects people, it kind of really affects them. If you
Okay.
kind of understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, like people minding their business on 9/11, right? And then all of a sudden, one act affected millions of people. So that's understandable. As you looking from across the pond and you see the unchecked immigration here, crossing the border here in our southern border, Texas, California, and now finding out that the Biden administration is airplaning, bringing people via airplane. Is there a warning you have for us, or caution, a word of caution from what you see there? Because look, I look at Europe as America looking into the future, right? What's happening there, it's gonna come here, and so we have to prepare for it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I think when it happens, you can't undo it really. So I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to slow it down. Because I don't think there is, even in America, I don't think there probably would, even if Republicans got in, there is a political will to actually deport people. I think they will stop the immigration, but I think the people already in, I think unfortunately for you, you kind of.
Yeah, you may not. You probably don't. I mean, a lot of people are surprised that Obama. I don't know when he changed, but at the beginning of Obama's administration, he deported more people than any other president. Because there are viral clips of him saying that we're a nation of laws and you can't skip the line. Like, I wonder when that all changed. Joey, thoughts?
Well, the left, historically, the left has actually been like the labor, like, interested left has been critical of immigration, right? Like Bernie Sanders, when he ran in 2016, he was running as we need to slow the immigration. I think, what did Bernie Sanders say at the time? He said, unchecked immigration, that's a Koch brothers policy. And then I think what subsumed it here anyway, and I don't know if it's similar in the UK, but when the left adopted identity politics over traditional left-wing concerns on economics and whatnot, I think that's when they decided that, no, we're going to be the party of unchecked immigration. Because at the end of the day, you can't have Bernie Sanders economics and say you care about the working class in your country and then import just an unlimited class of people who are willing to work for, sustenance wages, right? That's going to undermine your local working class. And so it is kind of a betrayal for the left to adopt the position they have.
We have somebody, I want to put this here on the screen. Tom Crawford said this. What are your thoughts, guys? It's on the screen there.
Migration issues are much worse in England. Correct. I've seen a massive amount of pro-Hamas sentiment. Yes.
Yeah, so tell us about that, Ben.
I'm in Leicestershire. So I don't live in the city, but I go in for uni. And when I was going in, basically, so October 7th was, I think, was Saturday or Sunday. It was like literally by the Wednesday.
Saturday. It was Saturday.
Oh, it was a Saturday. So by the Tuesday, Wednesday sort of time in the week, there were already kind of like demonstrations. And it's like Israel hadn't even responded then. And it was like kind of fully out in the streets. So it's like quite shocking because, to be honest, I didn't really had never seen anything like that before. Where it's like actually hundreds of people out there.
Yeah, and I don't know where Baptists. Well, I kind of have an idea where American Baptists stand on Israel, but what's your thought on Israel? And let me preface it with this: Joey and I defend Israel often, not because of their religious position. We don't think they have some end time political referendum, or what's the word I'm looking for? End time political significance in prophecy. However, we defend Israel a lot often, and we give them some slack because they're the only democracy in that hellhole of that area, right? And so it's because they are a democracy. I give you an example for myself. I was there in 2019, and I was talking to Jews about Jesus right on the Wailing Wall, right? Which is supposed to be, sacred place. And we had great conversations. If I would try that in Gaza, I may live for like 5 minutes. And so that tells me a lot about who I want to protect. What's your view as a Baptist and as an, from England? And how do you feel about the Hamas rallying cry?
Yeah, so I would probably describe myself as a Zionist. So I do support Israel. I think a lot of the problems you do have you still do have problems with Israel. I'm not like saying that they're beyond criticism. I think there
No,
are
of course
some
not. Yeah.
aspects of critiques, yeah. So I think it's one of those situations where we should kind of support kind of our allies in the region.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it's because politics does cause like strange relationships, things that probably don't really make sense in reality. But because of the political reality, you have to have allies and enemies kind of in certain regions of the world.
Okay. And
Yeah,
how do you go ahead?
I was going to say I don't know how most people think about it. I think there's a lot of people who I was talking with my grandma, and this was she was talking about people in her life group, and someone was like talking all like bad, like, oh, Israel's doing all this like rubbish and stuff, and then she was like, she didn't even a lot of the people who kind of fall onto the like pro-Palestinian side just see something on Instagram, they see like one like graphic, and they have like completely they've never posted about it before, and that just kind of becomes a whole identity in the
So
pro-Palestinian support.
is Grandma Baptist too, or is she part of
Yeah,
the? Okay. All right.
yeah.
So how long does your Baptist tradition go in your family?
So I'm adopted, so I'm kind of you could say first generation. Every Baptist is kind of first generation. But my granddad was a Baptist minister until about 10 years ago. He retired, and his dad was a Baptist minister before him. And then my granddad, my other granddad, his parents also were Baptist, and
Okay.
he does like music and stuff at the church.
Okay.
So
And
it's
how
the
do you?
most family.
Yeah. How do you feel personally, right? Uh, when you see the pro Hamas rallies, and like you mentioned, even before Israel even retaliated, they were chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. How did that hit you emotionally, you yourself and your friends, right? Because I'm pretty sure you have diverse set of friends. What was the thought there?
Sure. So when I kind of saw it, because you see kind of public opinion polls on what a lot of Muslims think, and you think, oh, they probably don't actually believe it. They're probably much more like moderate. Like that's what I just kind of assumed. But then when I saw in the streets actually how many it was, I was actually really shocked. Which I probably shouldn't have been, but it's one of those things where
Has
kind
anybody
of
ever?
reality.
Yeah. Has anybody? Because you say you go to a predominantly Muslim area school. Has anybody ever challenged you? Because you're a native Briton, right? You have the light skin and all that. Have you experienced reverse racism or whatever they want to call it these days?
Not really. I don't think so. It's one of those things where I mean, if you look out for everything, you kind of could see yourself kind of as a victim. But to be honest, I don't think there is any really like that much. I think
Okay.
sometimes with certain opportunities, they sure there are, but not yet. I don't think.
Okay. All right. Joey, jump in here.
Yeah, well, so when I saw, I think it was the London Bridge, and this was shortly after October 7th, and it was one of the
And yeah,
first mass protests that I saw, and it was just loaded with people, protesting in favor of Hamas, in favor of what had just happened on October 7, right? In England, I looked at that and I'm like, I mean, this is right, the American global order, right? America being the world superpower. We got that. We were handed that after World War II because Britain, couldn't do it anymore. But Britain has always been, America's closest ally. And I'm like, seeing that, I was like, oh, what's happening there? And then, it didn't take long. And every American college campus, we saw the same thing. And I'm like, it's like we have, again, immigration, if it's going to work, it's got to be over a long period of time, slowly, and you assimilate people into your culture. But what we've done, certainly what you guys have done, seemingly I think even more than we have, but what we've done here is we've brought people here, but we've told them you can just have whatever culture you want. And it's like that's like we have two different nations or multiple different nations living in one. That's always going to breed conflict, right? Like we got to get rid of was it Larry Elder? I think was like, listen, take the hyphen in front of my name. I'm not an African American. I have no ties to Africa. Right? That, right? A multi-ethnic society, I think, can be a great thing, but you have to have that shared culture. And what we saw after October 7, right here, is we have divergent cultures living in the same spot, and I think that's always going to breed some kind of cultural conflict. And so,
well, it's a powder keg. That's what it is. It becomes a powder keg. Look, I'm Hispanic. My parents are both Hispanic. My mom's Dominican. My father was Peruvian. I was born in the States. However, that being said, I personally, being Hispanic, said I would never marry immigrant of any race that wasn't they didn't capture the American culture, right? Because there are some Hispanics, let me pick on Hispanics, who come here and they still want to live like they're in Mexico or in Peru or in Dominican Republic. I couldn't do that. I'm too much of an American, even though I value my heritage. I wanted an Americanized person. Now, I ended up marrying a Caucasian woman, so that's a different story for a different day. But the reality is I love what America stands for, which at its best stands for freedom of religion, liberty of conscience, where we can express ourselves, yet we have that American ideal, which is to bring democracy, true democracy, to the world. But that's going to pot, as it is in Europe. And so, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is something Michael Knowles talks about quite a lot, and I think it's one of those things where it's like it's supporting free speech, but it's one of those things where it's like there is a thought that stops thought, and that's kind of the only thought that should be stopped. So I think with people who, it's kind of hard to, if you let people into a democracy who don't believe in democracy, it kind of seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So let me ask you, if you were in charge, go ahead. Yeah.
So if this podcast ever really blows up, we'll know we've made it when Media Matters clips out the stuff we're talking about, culture and immigration, and calls us racist. But I wanted to say one thing. I recently read Barack Obama's autobiography, whatever, Dreams from My Father. And there's literally a passage in there. This was before he was president. And he's like, when I would go down to these rallies, these immigration, and I'd see people flying Mexican flags and Colombian flags, he's like, the nativist in me was be like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Like, there's nothing racist, right? Like I said, even Barack Obama, when he was a more honest man, admitted to it. Like, there's nothing unnatural or racist or wrong about not wanting people who are disloyal to your country in your country. And sometimes I feel like we kind of hush ourselves, like as conservatives, when we say that, because Media Matters or whatever, they're gonna spin it. But it's true, right? Like, love of one's country is a natural affection.
Well, because look, at the back of everybody's head, right, and the back of my head, right. Let's say we're all diverse. Like I said, my dad's Peruvian, my mom's Dominican. I was born here. And I don't care, there are Mexicans in my family. There are Koreans in my family, through marriage. There's actually Jews in my family through marriage and all that. But in the end of the day, the thought is, right, if somebody attacks America, are you going to jump ship and fight with them? Right? I want to know that we have each other's back. And that's where only freedom, you're talking from a political standpoint, only freedom, true freedom, can bring that unity. Because we saw it in the war in Iraq. As soon as those soldiers were faced with either keep fighting for this dictator or surrender and be part of a new free Iraq, they abandoned ship and surrendered, right? Because you want something powerful to fight for. And I think when we have unchecked immigration, when people are not assimilating to the culture, then it's like giving a hungry man, a banquet. He's going to kill himself, right? A truly starving man, right? If you give him a banquet, he's going to kill himself because he's not ready for all that food, just like some people aren't ready for all that freedom that comes with this country. And they don't know what to do with it. What's that video that was going viral of that illegal immigrant showing people how to squat in people's houses and take their houses and then bragging about it? Bro, I would have put him on a first class plane to Hamas. See how he likes it there.
Yeah,
Thoughts on
I was
that?
just gonna.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say something I missed out. Last year there were race riots in Leicester. So it was between the Muslims and the Hindus, and it was over a cricket match. So you have massive kind of overreactions to conflicts, then completely the other side of the world, and like everyone else is just like no one knows what's going on, but you just heard about it, and it's just kind of insane.
Yeah,
So
had it been fights between Muslims or Hindus and native Britons, then it would have been all over the world. But they keep it hush hush when it's the immigrants causing the issues. Go ahead.
Something about that is even more telling, though, right? So, in other words, you're in England, right? And you have two whole cultures that aren't English, right? Having a fight between each other in England, right? That's not even about anything that's traditionally English. And that just, something about that just feels wrong, right? Like, and because to what you were saying before, Gio, is like, yes, like you appreciate your heritage, right? And like, listen, I'm Puerto Rican, which Puerto Ricans are American citizens, but as that, we have Spanish heritage, and like that's all cool and all. But at the end of the day, while I appreciate my heritage, like I don't give two hoots about Spain, right? Like that doesn't matter. Like if there was a Spanish issue that was to come up in the United States, and like there's no way I'm rioting on behalf of any Spanish issue, right? Like my issues are American, baby. And like I said, I'm not even. I mean, I think I have some English, right? Like I did one 23andMe, but it's like I have more loyalty to English values certainly than I do to Spanish values, even though I have more of that in my blood. But yeah,
because look, America, as in the United States of America, we really don't have a race that is, you could say, this is the ideal American race, right? We're a boiling pot. And so what unites us, or what should unite us, is the ideals of America that are found in the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, in the Bill of Rights. It's those ideals. Look, if I could take those ideals to Iraq and they actually take hold, then I could live there. No. That's why I preface it. If they actually would take hold, then I could live there, right? It's the ideals. It's not the race per se, right? It's the ideals. And unfortunately, though, we know, coming from a religious perspective, is that these ideals are hated by those who don't love God. Because liberty of conscience is the ultimate religious freedom that God wants from everybody. For everybody to make choices based on the dictates of their conscience. So that's what I'm after. I could care less about the color of your skin.
So bringing the conversation back to religious matters. So obviously we've seen the stories of, I believe it was outside an abortion clinic in, I don't know, was it in London or somewhere in the UK? And a woman was praying silently in her head, and the police like accosted her and I think even arrested her. Right? We've seen, was it Calvin Robinson was taken off the air for various views that he has. Right? So we see religious liberty being cracked down upon in England. And by the way, I want to emphasize a nation with a state church, a supposedly Christian nation. So I guess I would say, what would you say as a Christian, as a Baptist living, what is the best way for Christians in the UK to live out their faith, to evangelize, and to kind of engage politically? Like what avenues are there for people of faith in England and the UK?
Sure, I think it's one of those things where I think to live out your values is massively important. I think the problems we have are cultural and kind of social problems. But I think there have been worse times in England. They're probably the worst is yet to come. That's what I always say. I think if you think it's bad now, I think it'll be worse before it gets better. But also, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, every society falls. Everything. I mean, people thought Rome wouldn't fall, but Rome did fall. So I think the British Empire has been falling. I mean, it's since World War One, the British Empire started to fall. So it's one of those things where every empire comes to an end.
I couldn't agree more with that, because America is coming to an end too. But that being said, when America goes down, don't worry about it, because Jesus is coming. Go ahead.
Well, to that note, I'll say that the last thing as the ship of freedom, right, like Clavin always says, as the ship of freedom sinks below the icy waters of totalitarianism, the last thing you'll see clutching the Constitution is my hand sticking up above the icy waters. But to your point, Ben, here's a joke for you. What's the difference between a conservative pessimist and a conservative optimist? A conservative pessimist says, things are as bad as they possibly could be. And a conservative optimist says they could be worse.
Yes. And look, and from a prophetic standpoint, from our faith tradition, it's going to get worse. And unfortunately, America is going to be leading the brigade. There's going to be, Joey and I are very fearful of the Christian nationalism movement rising. I think there's going to be an overcorrection between this woke ideology. Picture right in your mind what wokeism is today and how they are wanting to impose everything, even subvert liberty of conscience. Now picture that, but on the opposite end, right? When people are trying to legislate morality and trying to force people to worship in a certain way. And I think those two extremes is what the Gio and Joey show is trying to circumvent. And so we have to always be diligent from enemies from within or without, or from the left or from the right.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
It's
Yeah,
like
I actually
Clavin-
do find
Go ahead.
I do find it quite concerning what's going on. I mean, kind of on the left and on the right. I think moderation is important.
Okay, Joey?
like Clavin has been saying on his show, right? There's in reaction to the excesses of the left, you have particularly a lot of young conservatives right here, and I don't know as much about there. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a hint there, but like who they're so disillusioned with the system that they're talking about monarchy in like a positive way, and they're talking about the constitutional bargain has failed, right? And liberty itself, like liberalism, like lowercase l liberalism, just doesn't work, and we need to throw it all out. And I don't know, but is there nothing good? Like this is what Clavin was saying. Is like, is there no good thing about liberty of conscience for its own sake? Right? Is that not something worth defending? And like, I get why people could say, right, if you have debauchery all around you, right? Like that video you shared with us we started out with, right? The drag queens like taking to the streets of London and the libraries of America. Like you can see that, and you can have a guttural reaction that we just got to stop this. And like, don't get me wrong, I do think we need to stop it. I'm not an anarchist, right? I think there's a role for government, but prescribed in its, constitutionally limited forms.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the best when people are honest, when a country, and I keep referring to the quote, Joey, John Adams, right? That the Constitution was written for moral and I love the quote, but I always moral and religious people. And we're starting to see, right? Religiosity is declining. And on that note, we'll go to the Richard Dawkins video here in a second, right? On that note, even a professor and a professed atheist like Dawkins can see that the decline of Christianity is not good for anyone, including atheists. And before I play that clip, any thoughts on that? Set it up, Joey, for what people are going to see here.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to play it in this one is because the country that Dawkins is from and that he's talking about is your country, obviously. And what I think with, like, listen, I've actually always kind of had a soft spot for Dawkins, at least among the new atheist crowd, right? You know, he stood up against, way back when, he's been standing up against Islam, kind of in a broader anti-theist thing, but he told the truth about Islam when it wasn't politically correct on the left, right? He's stood up a little bit too late.
There's a distinction between being a believing Christian.
He stood up a little bit, sorry. He stood up a little bit too late on the gender question,
well,
but he has stood up in favor of biology. And so I kind of like him. But it's like what we're about to see, and what we heard there a little bit was I think reality has kind of smacked him in the face after October 7. And he's like, wait a minute, Christianity's gone and secularism didn't just come, right? We've got wokeism, and he doesn't like that. And now we're getting this other form of theistic religion. And he's like, wait a minute. Like, I may not have liked the Christians, but with the Islamic, hordes at the gate, like, I don't know. Maybe we need a few Christian, at least cultural Christians. But we'll get into that.
There's a reason why Richard Dawkins isn't from Iran or Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, because he wouldn't have made it to this ripe old age had he been in those countries that do not have what I harp about, in essence, liberty of conscience, the ability. Only in Christian nations, Judeo-Christian nations, do you have the right to dissent and not be leery or worried about getting your head cut off. Let's watch this video and then we'll talk about it.
Slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer. But there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
Well, which brings me to my supplementary point, which is that, as we know, church attendance is plummeting, but the erection of mosques across Europe, I think 6,000 are under construction, and there are many more, are being planned. So do you regard that as a problem? Do you think that matters?
Yes, I do, really. I have to choose my words carefully. If I had to choose between Christianity and Islam, I choose Christianity every single time. It seems to me to be a fundamentally decent religion in a way that I think Islam is not.
I think you're going to have to explain why you say that, Professor Dawkins. Why is Islam fundamentally not decent like Christianity?
Yes, I mean the way women are treated. I mean, Christianity is not great about that. It's had its problems with female vicars and female bishops and things, but there's an active hostility to women, which is promoted, I think, by the holy books of Islam. I'm not talking about individual Muslims, who of course are quite different, but the doctrines of Islam, the Hadith and the Quran, is fundamentally hostile to women, hostile to gays. Um, and I find that I like to live in a culturally Christian country, although I do not believe a single word of the Christian faith. Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country.
Yeah. And so, Ben, your thoughts on that when you heard it first?
Yeah, I think it's too little, too late, kind of, with Richard Dawkins. I think also Salman Rushdie was a friend of Richard. I mean, he's still alive, but I think what happened to him, if you saw him on Piers Morgan about a month after that happened, he basically didn't want to say anything about Islam. He literally looked petrified. And he was asked any questions about it by Piers Morgan.
Isn't that incriminating, right? That you're so fearful that you can't talk about. Hey, look, I'm not going to talk bad about anybody just to get a rise out of them. But if I have to speak the truth to power, I shouldn't be afraid to do that. And yet, obviously, because we haven't, governments haven't dropped the hammer on stupidity like that, you let the loonies run the asylum, and that's what they're going to do.
I have to say with Dawkins, and there's this big movement of people who want, like, they call themselves cultural Christians, and to me it seems like you want the fruit, but you don't want the tree, right? You want the substance. And here's the thing: I think in the West, what we've been experimenting with is a Christian ethos, right? A Christian society without Christian people, and that's in other words, before obviously now I speak out against the Christian nationalism movement, but before, say, 2021, when I think it really started taking off, like here after January 6th and whatnot, and it had been used as a slur, and then you saw like MTG and people use the phrase. Before that, like, I've used the phrase Christian nation or Judeo-Christian nation to refer to America before. In other words, to what you were saying about John Adams before, is, listen, when the people were Christian, I think it's safe to say, you have a Christian society, but they weren't Christian because the state had, we had an established church or whatever, but we had a culture that was informed by Christian people, made up of Christian people. And ultimately, as we lost that in the 20th century, we still had, we were still able to ride out the fumes of, we kind of had order, right, because of the Christian past. But as people have stopped going to church, as we've loosened Christian sexual mores in our culture, right, as that's happened, I think really, for me, I think the breaking point in society was 2020, where it's like the wheels came off, and now we were living in a truly post-Christian world. And you see guys like Dawkins, who pushed this post-Christian world, pushed for a post-Christian morality. Now that the wheels came off, they got what they wanted. They're looking at it and they're like, wait a minute, what happened to the Christian morality? The Christian morality that we've spent my career pushing against, now that it's gone, we want it back. And it's like, well, sorry, man, you made your bed, and now we all have to lie in it.
And that's exactly what is been prophesied in Scripture, right? That's what exactly happens to all the nations. We did a episode early on in our show called Sex and Culture, J.D. Unwin's book, about the depravity that once a nation starts losing its moral values, especially around marriage and the family and things like that, the nation doesn't recover. And we're there. And the only solution, Ben, before I give you the last word as we wrap up, the only solution is a faith-saving relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you're Muslim or Jew or Hindu or atheist, Jesus is the only answer. And so, I mean, look at the 1040 window for people who know what the 1040 window is. It's all those Islamic countries. Would you rather live here or there? Okay, enough said. Everybody needs Jesus. Jesus is needed afterwards. After all. Go ahead, Ben. You got the last word.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It was actually a great conversation. I was just going to say that that even if someone who's listening to this who hasn't heard the good news, to find a church that is a Bible believing church, and I think anyone there will be happy to speak with you. Or if there's anyone on the show you want, we'll be happy if you message us. We'll be able to give you some information if you'd like it.
Okay. Until next time, thank you all for watching the Gio and Joey Show. God bless. I needed to put one last comment on the YouTube. Stay on, Ben, for a few seconds.